I moved to Charlotte to breathe again. I moved to start over. My ex-wife Denise married her new man exactly 18 days after the ink dried on our divorce papers. She called him a genius. She called him a real estate mogul. My own daughter Simone looked me dead in my face and told me she'd be walking down that aisle as the maid of honor, because she finally had a father figure who understood what real success looked like. They thought I was done. They thought I was just a worn-out old union foreman with a bad knee and a broken heart. They were wrong. At that wedding reception, one guest stood up, raised a glass, and said a single sentence that made Denise drop a champagne flute right there on the marble floor. And then at 3 in the morning, my phone rang. But before I tell you how that night ended, I have to take you back to where it all fell apart. My name is Marcus Whitfield. I'm 68 years old, and for 36 years I worked as a foreman on construction sites all over this city. I poured the foundation for half the buildings downtown, including the courthouse where my marriage got legally buried. If you've ever given your whole life to people who only ever saw you as a paycheck, go on and hit that like button. Subscribe if you're new here, and tell me in the comments, family, what city you're listening from tonight. I read every single one of them. The courthouse steps were still warm from the afternoon sun, but I felt a chill straight down to my bones. I was standing there holding the keys to my truck, my F-250, the one I'd bought with 15 years of overtime and a back that never quite recovered. It was the only thing I'd let myself splurge on in a lifetime of clipping coupons and skipping vacations so my family could have what they needed. Before I could even get the door open, a hand with long acrylic nails, painted a shade of red I used to think was pretty, snatched the keys straight out of my palm. It was Denise. 61 years old, still put together, but there was something underneath her makeup now that hadn't been there before. Something hard. She dangled my own keys in front of my face like she was baiting a dog. "Don't embarrass yourself, Marcus," she said, loud enough that 2 lawyers walking by slowed down to watch. "The judge gave me the truck. It goes with the house. Same as the 65% of your pension you'll be sending my way. You don't need a truck like this anyway." "Where are you gonna go? The senior center?" I stood there with my hands still open in the air, like I was waiting for something to fall into them. It wasn't about the truck. Lord knows it was never about the truck. "Denise," I said, and I kept my voice low. Kept it steady, because I learned a long time ago on job sites that the man who raises his voice first is the man who loses the argument. I rebuilt that transmission myself. I know that engine better than the men who made it. She laughed. It wasn't a laugh I recognized from 38 years of marriage. It was sharp, like glass. "That's exactly it, Marcus. That's what you never understood. You love getting under a hood. You love breaking a sweat for a paycheck. Terrence doesn't fix trucks, baby. Terrence owns the dealership they come from. That's the difference between a laborer and a man who's actually arrived. Terrence. The name sat in my mouth like something spoiled. The man she'd been seeing for the better part of a year, while I was still coming home every night, believing we were building toward retirement together. I took a breath. On a job site, when a circuit's overloaded, it doesn't matter how angry the current gets you. Either bleed it off safe or something catches fire. I was not going to catch fire. Not on those steps, in front of God in the county courthouse, and every lawyer with a lunch break to kill. "Enjoy the ride," I told her. Remember, she likes synthetic oil, not the cheap stuff. Denise rolled her eyes and reached into her purse, a purse I recognized, because I'd paid for it, and pulled out a small plastic card. She flicked it at my chest, like she was flicking away a fly. It bounced off my shirt and landed in a puddle of motor oil at my feet. "I didn't want you stranded out here," she said, smiling now, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "That's a bus pass, $20 on it. Ought to get you wherever you're staying these days. Consider it a going-away gift." I looked down at that little card floating in the oil. 38 years of marriage, raising a daughter together, paying for her mother's hip surgery, her sister's rent when times got hard, every anniversary trip she said she deserved. And here I was, priced out at $20 and a city bus schedule. I bent down, slow my knees not what it used to be, and picked it up anyway. Wiped the oil off with my handkerchief. Some things you do just to keep your dignity intact, even when nobody else in the parking lot cares whether you have any left. As I straightened up, a shadow fell across me. It was Simone, my daughter. 31 years old, wearing a blazer that looked like she'd borrowed it from somebody twice her size, trying real hard to look like the people she saw on those business podcasts she was always quoting lately. She had a box of her mother's things, moving them from my truck's back seat into a car I didn't recognize. "Simone," I said, stepping toward her, "maybe we can grab something to eat later. I need to figure out my next move, and I'd like my daughter beside me while I do it." She wouldn't look at me. She stared at her shoes like they had something written on them. "I can't, Daddy," she said, real quiet. "Terrence is taking us to Nona's downtown. The one with the $200 steaks. We're celebrating." "Celebrating," I repeated, and I felt something crack open in my chest that had nothing to do with my heart condition. "Celebrating the end of your parents' marriage?" Simone finally looked up, and what I saw in her eyes hurt worse than any divorce decree ever could. It was pity, mixed with something close to embarrassment. Embarrassment of me. "Look, Daddy, let's just be honest," she said, and there was a confidence in her voice I hadn't heard growing up, a borrowed confidence, the kind people pick up from folks they're trying to impress. "You worked hard, I know that. Nobody's saying you didn't. But the world's different now. You can't save your way into anything real. Terrence is going to teach me about real estate, about building actual equity, about generational wealth." She glanced back at her mother, who was already behind the wheel of my truck, revving my own engine like she was trying to prove a point to somebody. "You're a good man, Daddy," Simone went on, and each word landed like a small, precise cut. "But you think small. Terrence thinks big. He can open doors for me you never even knew existed. You should be happy for Mama. She finally got the upgrade she's been waiting on." Upgrade. My own daughter called another man an upgrade over the father who taught her to ride a bike on this very street, who sat up 3 nights straight when she had pneumonia at 9 years old, who paid every cent of a college degree she now used to quote strangers on the internet about equity and leverage. I looked at my daughter and I didn't recognize the person looking back at me, and that scared me more than anything Denise had said all afternoon. I didn't fight either one of them. Wasn't any fighting left in me that day, at least not the kind you can see from the outside. I walked 2 miles to a motel off Independence Boulevard, because I didn't trust myself behind a car anyway, not with my hands shaking the way they were. I checked into a room with a broken ice machine and a bedspread that smelled like somebody else's cigarettes, and I sat on the edge of that bed for a long time. Didn't cry, didn't call anybody. Just sat there, running numbers in my head, the way I used to run numbers on a job before I ever poured a foundation. Because here's the thing, nobody in that courthouse parking lot knew. Not Denise, not Terrence, not my own daughter. 36 years as a foreman doesn't just mean a pension. It means I was the man. Other men brought their overtime problems too. It means when 3 of my old crew members started a specialty concrete company back in the 90s, they asked me to come in as a silent partner, because I was the only one who understood both the work and the numbers. It means I said yes, quietly, put in what savings I had, and never told my wife how that investment grew over 3 decades. Because early on in our marriage, I watched Denise spend faster than most men could earn, and something in me, call it instinct, call it a lifetime of laying pipe and reading blueprints, told me to keep one thing that was only mine. That company got bought out 2 years back by a national firm. My silent piece of it, the piece nobody at that courthouse knew existed, came to just north of $6 million. I never touched a dime of it during the divorce proceedings. Never mentioned it to my lawyer beyond what the law required, and the law, as it turns out, doesn't require you to announce an old handshake investment from 30 years ago if it's structured right and your lawyer knows what he's doing. Denise walked away certain she'd taken me for everything. She hadn't taken anything but a truck and a piece of my pride. And pride, I've learned, grows back if you let it. 3 weeks after that day in the parking lot, I flew to Portugal. Not to run, to breathe. I rented a little house up in a hill town outside Lisbon where the mornings smell like the ocean and nobody knows me as anybody's ex-husband or anybody's disappointment of a father. I walked cobblestone streets every morning with a cane I didn't need but liked the feel of anyway. I learned to make a proper espresso. I let the sun do something to my skin that 36 years of hard hats had never allowed. For the first time since I could remember, nobody needed anything from me. Denise and Terrence got married 18 days after the divorce was final. 18 days. I know because Simone posted about it, before she must have realized who all could see her page. The wedding was at a vineyard outside the city, the kind of place that charges more for one Saturday than I made my first 2 years as a foreman. I wasn't invited, obviously, didn't expect to be, but I have people who still talk to me. Old crew, church friends, a cousin of Denise's who never did like how Denise treated me and made sure I heard how things went down. The way I heard it, that reception was something out of a magazine. String quartet. An ice sculpture of their initials melting slow under string lights. Terrence stood up during the toast in a suit that cost more than my truck, and he made a speech about vision, about building something real, about how Denise had finally found a partner who matched her ambition instead of, and I'm told, these were close to his exact words, a man who spent his whole life fixing what other people broke. Simone gave a toast too, talked about her mother finding happiness, about new beginnings, about how proud she was to watch her mother be chosen the way she deserved. Nobody mentioned me, not once. 38 years and a daughter, and I didn't exist in the story they told that night. But here's what nobody at that vineyard accounted for. Denise's cousin, a woman named Aretha who'd known me since before Simone was born, stood up near the end of the toasts, glass in hand, and said she wanted to say something too. She'd had a little wine in her, and grief has a way of loosening a tongue same as wine does. She looked right at Denise and said, loud enough that the string quartet actually stopped playing, I just think it's a shame Marcus isn't here to see this, since half the money paying for this open bar came out of a settlement he could have fought and didn't. That wasn't even the sentence that did it. Aretha kept going, and she said the line that apparently made Denise go white as the tablecloth. Funny how quick you forget a man's worth once somebody shows you a nicer car. Wonder if you ever stopped to ask Marcus what he was really worth before you decided he wasn't worth anything at all. Denise dropped her champagne glass right there on the marble dance floor. It shattered, and for a second, nobody in that whole vineyard said a word. Terrence tried to laugh it off, tried to wave it away as an old woman who'd had too much to drink, but something had already cracked, the way ice cracks under weight before it actually gives way. Simone told me later, much later, that her mother didn't say another word for the rest of the reception, just sat there smiling with her eyes somewhere else entirely. I didn't hear about any of this until the next morning, sitting on my little terrace outside Lisbon with a coffee going cold in my hand, when my phone rang at 3 a.m. Their time, which meant it was already morning where I was. I almost didn't answer. Almost let it ring out into the Portuguese sunrise and go on with my day. But something told me to pick it up. It was Simone. Her voice didn't sound like the voice that told me I thought small. It sounded like the voice of a 9-year-old with pneumonia, small and scared and looking for her father in the dark. "Daddy," she said, and I heard something behind her voice, some kind of commotion, raised words, maybe Denise crying somewhere in another room. "Daddy, I need to ask you something, and I need you to just answer me straight. Aretha said something at the wedding about a settlement. About money. Is it true you had money nobody knew about? Terrence's business, Daddy, the real estate thing. It's some of the properties. They're not what he said they were. There's people asking about fraud, about investors losing money, and Mama's scared they're going to come after everything. The house, all of it. And I don't, Daddy, do you have money? Can you help us?" There it was. The question underneath every question they'd ever have for me from that day forward. Not, "Are you okay, Daddy?" Not, "I'm sorry for what I said in that parking lot." Just, "Can you help us?" Because now that the new king had turned out to be sitting on a throne made of sand, they remembered the old king existed after all. I sat there on that terrace a long moment, watching the sun come up gold over rooftops that didn't know a single thing about my divorce, or my daughter, or the $20 bus pass still sitting in a drawer back in Charlotte, because I'd kept it. Strange as that sounds, kept it as a reminder of exactly what I was worth to people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. "Simone," I said, and my voice didn't shake, which surprised even me. "I love you. I have always loved you, since before you could walk, and I will love you until the day I die. But I am not going to be anybody's wallet again. Not yours, not your mother's, not a man who called me small for 30 years of honest work while he was out here running whatever scheme is about to collapse on both of you. Daddy, please, we could lose the house. You mean the house I paid the mortgage on for 22 years and got told I didn't need? I said, gentle as I could manage, because gentle was still true even while it was firm. Simone, I'm not calling to hurt you. I'm answering, rather, because I want you to hear this from me directly, one time, so there's no confusion later. I am fine. Better than fine. I did not lose everything in that divorce, baby girl. I lost a marriage that had already ended long before the papers said so. What I kept quiet. And I kept it because a man learns after enough years of laying foundations that you always keep something in reserve that nobody else can see. That's not selfishness. That's survival. She was crying now. I could hear it plain. So you do have money. I have peace, I told her. For the first time in longer than I can remember, I have actual peace, sitting on a terrace in a country you've never asked me one question about. And I am not going to trade it to bail out a man who called your father small at his own wedding reception. You're a grown woman, Simone. I raised you to be smarter than this. I believe you still are, somewhere under all this. But you're going to have to find that out for yourself, same as I had to find my own way out of that parking lot with nothing but a bus pass and my pride. There was a long quiet on the line. I could hear, faint in the background, what sounded like Denise's voice rising, then breaking. I didn't ask what was happening on her end. Wasn't my circus, not anymore. I'm sorry, Daddy, Simone finally said, so quiet I almost missed it. For what I said, about you being small. I know, baby, I said. When you're ready to talk, really talk. Not because you need something from me, you call this number. I'll answer. I'll always answer for you, just not for this. I hung up the phone, and I sat there another minute, with the sun climbing higher over those rooftops, and I closed the banking app I'd pulled up out of habit. The second I heard the word money, the account with $6 million and some change, sitting quiet where it had sat quiet for years. Untouched. Unspoken. Mine. I closed it, set the phone face down on the little iron table, and I picked my coffee back up. It had gone cold. I didn't mind. Some things taste fine cold, once you've made peace with the weight. I wasn't ever going back to being the provider on command. I wasn't the wallet, and I wasn't the man who fixes what other people break. Not anymore. Not unless I chose to. I was just a man on a terrace in Portugal, watching the light change over a city that never once called me small, never once flicked a bus pass at my chest, never once needed a single thing from me, except my footsteps on its old stone streets in the cool of the morning. Family, if you take one thing from an old foreman who's seen more foundations poured and more marriages fall than most men care to count, let it be this: keep something of your own. Not out of spite, not out of fear, but because the day may come when the people who called you small will need to know exactly how tall you really stood the whole time. And when that day comes, you don't owe anybody the satisfaction of finding out for free. If this story meant something to you tonight, go on and hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and whether you've ever had to walk away from people who only valued you for what you could give them. I read every one. Until next time, this is Marcus, wishing you peace, real peace, the kind that doesn't come with strings attached. There's a quiet kind of wealth that never shows up on paper, the kind you build by staying steady when people underestimate you and choosing peace over proving a point. You don't owe anyone a receipt for your worth. Keep something just for you, not out of spite, but so that when the storm passes, you're still standing, still whole, still warm inside. A small note for you, dear listener. This story was written and imagined by AI for entertainment, but the life lesson inside it is very real, and I hope it stays with you.